is which one of you ladies are going to do that?
We would like to introduce Mr. Andy Parks as the newest planning commission member.
Thank you.
So thank you for stepping up and being here.
Oh, sure. Excited to be here. Looking forward to it.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
Yeah.
Really.
Thank you.
Okay, item 3 on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the March 15th meeting. I had previously sent you the item about it not
The
showing up in
motion.
here, and it's not in here.
It's not in here. I added it to an amended copy and then, yeah.
I would make a motion to approve the minutes from the March 15th, 2022 meeting. I'd second that.
Okay, I've got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none.
Should that be as amended?
Yeah, we'll make the motion as. Okay,
Okay.
all right. Hearing none, we'll put it to a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. And Pastor Andy will abstain since he wasn't on the planning commission yet. All right. Then the next item on the agenda tonight is the public hearing for the consideration and a vote to approve the resolution adopting the Paola Comprehensive Plan and recommended for final approval by the city council. Do I have a motion to open the public hearing?
I would make a motion that we open the public hearing. Second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye. Same sign. Public hearing is now open.
This is Mr. Chris Shires with Confluence. Has a presentation for us and any questions.
Okay. Is there anybody from the public that wants to speak? Okay, did you receive any written communications from the public? Okay, so in that case, I would take a motion to close the public hearing.
I'd make a motion we close the public hearing.
I'll second that motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion carried. All right. Now, go ahead.
All right, Chair, Commission members, thank you very much for giving us this opportunity to present to you the final draft of the new comprehensive plan for Paola. Again, I'm Chris Shires, principal with Confluence, your consultant to lead on this project hired by the city a little more than a year ago. Also, I have Abby Hebert with our firm in the audience. She'll be doing part of our presentation tonight. And then super timely, right on time, Jay Aver with WSP, who actually, he'll do his couple little slides in there as well for the presentation. To be fair, we have a lot to roll through. If there's something you want us to stop and go into greater detail, I'd say feel free to interrupt us during the presentation, or something you have a question on or a comment, just interrupt us. And you can also give us the hurry up and move along. We know this part, this is a little boring, because there is a lot. It's a comprehensive plan is broad by nature and covers a lot of things. So for our presentation, we did want to review that project's schedule and how we reached out to the community and your stakeholders. We want to go through with you the vision statement and then the outline of the comprehensive plan document itself, and then go through kind of the high level, but then deep diving into a few important areas, all the chapter drafts, and then just a reminder of the next steps of where we go from here. And with that, I'm going to turn this part over to Ed.
So we completed this plan in a 4-phase process where we had opportunities to engage with people virtually or in person, depending on their comfort levels. So we had an interactive engagement website that we launched in June, where we had the same interactive engagement pieces that we had in person posted online, so people could still provide feedback to us. We then updated that in March of 2022 during our public open house phase, so that the comprehensive plan draft was out to the public for feedback. We also had a public workshop back in June of 21, a while back now, where we really just kind of introduced the plan to the public and started our interactive phase there to get their feedback. Had an opportunity to go to the Rotary Club and share the status of the plan and what was going on. As well as we attended a few of your farmers markets to really kind of put our name out there. We set up our tent, had a few different, the boards that you see there that were also on the engagement website. Really just finding a way to kind of get out into the community and really have good engaging conversation with them. As I mentioned, we had that public open house just a few weeks ago at the fire station in the gym where we had pretty good turnout and a lot of good conversation.
Question on that.
Yeah.
How do you feel that the public input on this project was compared to other similar sized cities that you usually see?
I think personally, we had a lot of great interactive conversations at the farmers markets. There was great attendance there and everybody really likes to come to the Park Square. So I feel like we had a lot of very good candid conversations as well as the stakeholder interviews where we had a series of those where we spoke with key people in the community and just got a lot of great feedback. I think, Chris, if you have any notes on that, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. We always want more. I would have liked a little more participation at our kickoff open house or public workshop and at the open house, although it was well attended. And maybe a little more traffic to our website. Part of it is there are a few key issues that are really important to the community that you've been working on. But in general, there's not a lot of animosity and anger, even in contrast to what you might feel at a council meeting. So that is sometimes not unusual, but I would have liked more. But just like Abby said, when we have those one-on-one conversations and those key stakeholder interviews, those are worth their weight in gold. That we really heard some important issues related to downtown, related to housing.
Thank you.
So at the open house, we had a series of boards there that kind of featured little highlights from each of the comp plan chapters. So that top portion you see there, those were just some of the highlights, whether graphically or statistically. Then we had the guiding principle itself of what we were hoping to achieve there. And then we asked the participants to rank from low to high priority each of the strategies associated with the goals for the chapter. So you can see here we have the community character and economic development. A lot of these were pretty focused on that high priority and how do we begin to implement those. Pretty consistent with natural resources, kind of a mixed bag there, as well as with parks and recreation, but more heavily focused on making sure that those are implemented moving forward, which I will break down each of these in further detail in the coming slides. Same thing for infrastructure and growth and development, really just making sure that it is a hot topic and that we do continue the conversation, but kind of a gamut of what priority level it was. So as we move into the vision statement, we have it as Paola has a real sense of community. It is a place people want to come home or come back to and raise a family or start a new life. Paola is a place where you can see the stars at night, but still access the city amenities with an easy drive. Paola takes advantage of opportunities to improve its quality of life through investments in housing, parks and recreation, and access to amenities. Paola stands out against its neighbors as a place that does not just provide a house, but a home. In short, Paola is a place where people and business thrive. So this is the layout of our plan that we have for you today. So the introduction really just defines our purpose, the process that we went through, identifying again that vision statement I just read for you, the guiding principles and the goals, the future land use map that we do have here tonight and that Chris will cover later on in the presentation, as well as the 7 different chapters that are the guiding principles itself. At the end of that, we have an implementation chapter that really just breaks down each of the goals, its priority level, and the time frame for accomplishment and achievement. So we'll jump into some of those draft chapter reviews. So each of the chapters begins with just kind of an overview of what it is, as well as the guiding principle and the intent for the chapter. We have strategic opportunity maps included in each of the chapters that really just kind of highlight some of those key features that we're focusing on as we look at those goals and strategies and policy and action items. So for housing, we have priority infill areas, hotspot rehabilitation nodes for that existing housing stock. How do we make sure that we keep those there and keep those affordable, but improve the quality of life for residents, as well as expanding those housing options with that medium to high density kind of housing typology, as well as where can we locate those accessory dwelling units and what are the best practices for making sure that those are quality and mix in with the residential stock as today, as well as where can we increase those single family subdivisions, a key point and a key comment we heard during our public input phase, as well as that upper story rehabilitation around the Park Square. So goal 1, we have preserve Paola's existing housing stock, and we intend to do so by prioritizing housing rehabilitation in those identified hotspot areas that you saw in the strategic opportunity map. as well as improve the existing housing programs that are in Paola today, expand program opportunities in Paola, as well as advertise and educate residents on available housing rehabilitation. So really just making sure that the programs today are functioning, opportunities to expand those to reach more residents, but then even just getting the word out to residents that these are programs they can seek out. For goal 1.2, we have expand housing options for current and future residents by diversifying the future residential development, so more of that medium density and high density residential, as well as expanding those renter options. Goal 1.3, we have improved accessibility and affordability of housing. We hope to do so by supporting developments that expand housing opportunities for low-income, senior, and workforce residents, as well as initiate a city-led project or city-led projects to improve availability of affordable housing in town. For section 2, we have economic development, reintroducing that guiding principle. For the strategic opportunity map here, we highlight those key corridors in Paola and how do we really retain kind of the businesses that are there and providing for the quality of life today, as well as those primary streetscapes and making sure that we make that character and identity strong and welcoming to the community. As well as those key points where we have proposed commercial business estate, airport business park, and industrial land uses. And then again, that hotspot rehabilitation that was previously mentioned in this housing chapter. Goal 2.1 here, we have attract economic growth in Paola by promoting coordination and partnerships for economic development in Paola and Miami County. Help support workforce developments efforts in Paola, as well as ensuring Paola facilities are prepared for additional economic growth, while just making sure that you have the structures in town and then the infrastructure to support that kind of growth. Then fostering a friendly business climate in Paola and ensuring the cost of doing business in Paola is fair but competitive still, as well as supporting the quality of life improvements in Paola. So everything that you guys are doing by bringing in amenities, bringing in extra businesses, and just really expanding the services in Paola is going to improve the quality of life. So how can we make sure that that is supported as it grows? Goal 2, we have retain Paola's existing businesses. So again, just support the ones that are here, both industrial sectors, small businesses, and then commercial corridors, really enhancing that downtown Paola as an engaging location for residents and visitors. I mean, through the farmers markets that we attend, and that's very evident today that people really like to utilize Park Square, and it's a great feature of your community today. It's definitely, you see it used time and time again throughout our report because it's just very beautiful to use as for photographs and just everybody's engaging there. So how do we make sure that that's retained as Paola continues to grow? For Parks and Recreation, we have the floodplain management as you are kind of surrounded by your floodplain on 3 sides of your city. Really finding those trail connections for where your existing trails are, but where you could maybe connect to locally and regionally, as well as that sidewalk expansion, making sure that there are a pretty solid and robust sidewalk network for people to get around on foot, as well as green infrastructure and park expansion, as well as making sure that the underserved areas are kind of taken note of and how those can be improved. We have a series of maps in the Parks and Recreation chapter that kind of just identify that level of service that you have today. So this one is a walk time analysis. The darker the color, the shorter the time is to walk to a park. So you see pretty much all Paola is able to walk to a park within 5 minutes, which is a great asset for you guys to have. As you get kind of farther out of town, it gets a little bit scattered there. So that's definitely something to keep in mind as we continue to propose residential developments in those areas and making sure that the park space is there to adequately provide open space for them. This one identifies those featured park half-mile service areas. So in that future land use plan, this proposed residential areas, making sure that they have, again, that open space that they can walk to within a reasonable amount of time. This one identifies the existing pathways in town, as well as the Lake Myola trails and the Wallace Park Trail networks, and then finding those ways to leverage those natural resources to then expand that trail network both locally and regionally again. So goal 3, we have enhanced existing parks and recreation facilities in Paola by providing a high level of service for parks in Paola. You're doing so today, so it's just a matter of how do we continue to make sure that those are still provided for residents as we continue to grow. Building upon that existing trail system, as well as improving recreation programs in Paola so that there's opportunities to engage everybody from little tiny tots into the elderly that want to have different rec programs as well. Really just making sure that every park system is connected as you guys continue to grow once more. Again, you'll see here in goal 3.2, we have expand upon those park systems as it as you guys continue to grow, which I've said many, many times probably now. We have maintain a high level of service for parks as you guys continue to grow, making sure again that that level of service and the walkability is still attainable and still there for residents, as well as again, just making sure those park systems are well connected. So maybe you can just park hop during the day. Goal 3.3, we have integrate best practices into Paola's parks and recreation systems. So really just aiming for resilient park facilities, making sure that they are kind of flood proof or all of their services are really easily fixed if anything were to happen damage wise, as well as maintaining an innovative and efficient park system. For natural resources and conservation, you'll see kind of some repeated themes between the Parks and Recreation chapter and this one. But again, this one builds upon the different like wetlands and just natural assets that are existing in Paola today. So here we have the stream buffers, really just making sure around that floodplain and the existing streams in Paola today that you're kind of preserving those, as you want to make sure that the floodplain is still non-buildable, but it is still acting as a natural resource for the community. That floodplain management, same kind of thing there with the trail connections, again, finding those existing ones, but where you can future or connect to in the future. Opportunities for green infrastructure, and then wetland preservation, as well as that tree cover preservation. So you really just want to make sure that you stay as green and lush as you are today. So we have goal 4.1 as preserve Paola's watershed and protect water quality by actively participating in the regional and state watershed initiatives, maintaining, expanding, and enhancing stream buffers in Paola, as well as preventing any rural and urban water pollution as development does occur. Keeping that green infrastructure up to date, and then really just kind of encouraging that transition into that green infrastructure. Goal 4.2 is to conserve important natural landforms in Paola. So discouraging any development on those steep slopes, really just to preserve their integrity, enhancing the community's tree canopy. The more tree canopy you can have in a community, the better it improves just every facet of quality of life, as well as preserving floodplain and wetlands to protect natural ecological systems. Goal 4.3 is to seek to create a system level approach to natural resource preservation by expanding and enhancing a connected parks and conservation system as Paola grows, as well as seeking to create a system of green infrastructure in Paola. So once it's there, how do you make it a robust system and network in the community? For community or section 5, we have community character, which this one focuses on a wide variety of different facets in the community and how you can kind of build upon the quality of life through the different key features you guys already have in the community today. So here we have proposed the support preservation efforts of downtown buildings and public spaces, can do so by that upper story rehabilitation that's kind of tied back into that housing chapter. The community-wide streetscape plan, again, just making sure that the character and identity of the streets is preserved and enhanced. That downtown neighborhood preservation district, making sure that those areas surrounding Park Square, whether it be done through infill redevelopment or housing rehabilitation programs, that those are kind of taken advantage of, as well as utilizing stream corridors for additional community trails. You already have those natural resources. How can you build upon those? The established gateway markers and at strategic entry points is how can you make Paola just a little bit more kind of identifiable and easily kind of once you're in city limits, you know you're here. For developed design guidelines, just making sure that quality of development is up to par for your guys' standards, as well as increasing downtown residences to kind of boost some of that medium and high density residential there. So goal 5, we have foster a vibrant and diverse downtown. We propose doing this by working with property owners and building officials to identify requirements for compliance with applicable codes and downtown building renovations. So as those more historical buildings are looking to be renovated, how can we amend the code or work with the code to make sure that those rehabilitation opportunities are feasible? Offer financial incentives for small businesses in downtown Paola. A lot of those rehabilitation or even just kind of getting a brick and mortar acquisition is a big undertaking for small businesses. So how can we work with them and support them as Paola looks to support their business in town? Support preservation efforts of downtown buildings and public spaces. So again, just making sure you improve and retain what you have today. Developing design guidelines for downtown buildings and public spaces to preserve the historical integrity of the district. Park Square is easily identifiable and it has that key character that you want to make sure you retain. So how do you do so with those design guidelines? as well as develop downtown streetscape plan to enhance the public realm, provide long-term solutions to parking in the downtown core to ensure ample supply and convenient location. Parking is always going to be a hot topic, and so how do you make sure that you guys are in that conversation and interacting with everybody to make sure that it's not just a problem, but it's an asset. Encouraging that infill development, again, just around downtown or throughout the rest of the community, as well as market and promote Paola. It's a great place to be. You just gotta attract the right people to your community to, again, support those small businesses and improve that quality of life. Goal 5.2, we have balance Paola's small town character with innovation and progress to remain competitive and attractive to new residents. Preserve Paola's historical residential neighborhoods. We did a housing analysis, and as we drove through town, we got so excited just to see the historical character of each of the homes and like just the different neighborhoods in Paola today. You can see kind of the historical timeline of when they were developed, and it's just really great to see. So it's like, how do you guys continue to preserve that and enhance that as development occurs in town? Discouraging that leapfrog development for new residential neighborhoods. You guys do a great job of kind of growing organically already. So how do you kind of shape the proposed residential developments into kind of fitting into those key pockets and then making sure that you grow in an organic and natural fashion, as well as making sure that developing residential guidelines for infill housing, making sure that it fits in within the character of that neighborhood, as well as enhancing Paola's character through citywide streetscape improvements and gateway opportunities. Goal 5.3, we have enhance and add public open space to improve the quality of life and health in the community. As I mentioned in the Parks and Rec and the natural resource chapters, those are just great ways to get people outside. So we do so by protecting Paola's floodplains, as well as utilizing the floodplain corridors for tourism and recreation amenities. And then I'm going to pass it on to Jay. Thank you, Alan.
Okay, so next chapter is infrastructure, transportation, and mobility. You'll see a lot of overlap with community character and with parks and recreation. A lot of these things are very interconnected, especially one of the key strategic opportunities was sidewalk networks, sidewalks and trails. It's something we heard over and over again from people. It was really important. Vail is a very compact, walkable city already. So making sure we can support that with the infrastructure to match the land use. Also, traffic safety was important. We have some corridors identified that could use some study, some different strategies for state funding and other funding sources that you can use to address those. Looking at road diets, lane narrowing, there's not very many roads. When we talk about our road diets, like if you have 4 lanes, 5 lanes, 6 lanes, you don't necessarily need that many. You can reduce the number of lanes. There aren't very many roads that be able to fit that character, but there are a couple. And the narrowing lanes are some roads that have some very wide lanes on them today that maybe don't need to be as wide. That kind of fits into the asset management as well, the amount of basically pavement, asphalt that you're maintaining. Again, looking at the downtown square, the transportation aspects of the infrastructure aspects down there to support the redevelopment and the existing businesses, parking policy, both downtown and throughout the city, asset management, essentially making sure that we have a really solid plan moving forward for how we can pay for maintenance obligations, how we can pay for expansion, and how we can really efficiently optimize the funding that's being spent on infrastructure. Technology, broadband is a huge thing that we heard a lot about. Rural broadband is a hot topic now with bipartisan infrastructure law. Vail is really well suited for the type of remote worker of the future that could work anywhere and have a really great quality of life in a small town feel. But we need that broadband, that rural broadband to support that. And then expanding infrastructure to support growth. So goal 6.1 is to create a safe and convenient multimodal transportation network. We want to eliminate traffic injuries on our streets. We want to complete that pedestrian and bicycle transportation network with sidewalks and trails. We want to look into establishing flexible on-demand transit service. Transit was something people mentioned a lot. Hill is not necessarily a place that can support traditional fixed route transit, except maybe commuter routes into Kansas City. But this idea of microtransit is really gaining traction. There's a lot of that going on in Johnson County. We have something like a flexible vehicle, a smaller vehicle that can be called ahead and fulfill that transit purpose. And then defining a street classification system that sort of falls into a lot of the more detailed recommendations and where to look at sidewalks, where to look at asset management, and how to manage some of those things. Goal 6.2 is encourage economic development and growth with smart infrastructure investments. So we want to support downtown with infrastructure investments. There are specific issues down there with fire flow requirements, with water lines, with sewer, other things. Everyone has aging infrastructure. At the same time, we want to look at the road, the sidewalks down there, the parking, the streets, how those are configured. And of course, you don't want to do a whole bunch of road, beautiful road and streetscape improvements. If you have to come in 5 or 10 years later and tear it all up to do a sewer or water line. So making sure we're supporting those with those investments. Incentivizing development through future road network construction, obviously bringing out a city street to a more rural area is a huge incentive for a developer to build there. But we also want to make those decisions very intentionally, talking about leapfrog development like Abby talked about. So we're incentivizing those developments, but we're not overcommitting the city's resources, expanding broadband access, and then updating parking policies, both downtown on the square. How can we incentivize parking turnover and efficient utilization, but then also throughout the city. Had a lot of people talk about kind of different parking policies in different parts of the city. You have some streets we have no parking on one side, you go to the next block, no parking is on the other side, the next block, no parking is on one side. So just kind of coming up with more standardized policy for how you implement no parking or parking policies throughout the city. And goal 6.3 is to maximize the impact of infrastructure investment, the asset management investment planning. Again, coming with a very detailed plan for year after year after year of investment, so we can get that very standardized and make it very efficient. And then smart infrastructure investments. That comes back to, again, this sort of idea of lane narrowing. How can we reduce our maintenance obligation? How can we get some of this asphalt out as we're doing repaving projects? Maybe we can narrow that road a little bit, then we just have that much less to repave in the future. Of course, we have to consider things like freight and other aspects like that in making those decisions. But every bit of asphalt we can take out that we don't need, that's something that we don't need to maintain in the future. And then also when you're expanding, when you're incentivizing that growth, when you're expanding the city, make sure we're not overbuilding those roads, that we don't necessarily need all that roadway capacity, that we're going to have to maintain basically in perpetuity, so that we're both incentivizing that growth, but we're not overburdening ourselves 10 or 20 or 50 years down the line when we have these big maintenance obligations.
Thank you. I was hoping you had a couple of tough questions for Jay. That's okay. All right. Last but not least, the growth chapter, growth and development chapter. Think of this as the future land use section. Frankly, the chapter most important to the Planning Commission. All these previous chapters do address things such as infrastructure and quality of life, parks and rec, all that type of important thing. But what we're talking here is really where what goes. And it is also our basis for our zoning and zoning decisions. And so in this chapter, we talk about the existing land uses, what we have today, and obviously all those colors mean something. So on this map, the light green is just open space, could even be ag land. Yellow is typically single family residential. The little bit of orange you see on there is townhomes, row houses. High density apartments is in brown. Then the darker green, that's more programmed park space or identified park and recreation areas. Public and semi-public in blue, something owned by the county, the city, the school district. And then commercial in red, retail uses, office in blue, and then light industrial in gray. And of course, we do have some water bodies. And so obviously today, the existing town, if I quit flipping back and forth, we do have a lot of open space. That's typical. That's normal. And then the biggest land use category really is single family residential, also very typical. And then a decent amount of commercial and office industrial land at a few percentages. And then being the county seat town, it's very logical that you have a large percentage as some kind of public, semi-public owned property. As we do include in this some growth projections, so we do feel the town is going to continue on its upward growth. And you're going to feel a little more growth pressure as other people find this a desirable community to live and a desirable community location for the school district. And so we did a bunch of different trends. But the big takeaway is we think the town's just going to continue with its steady growth. And how do we get kind of ahead of that? Because as we do those 2050 projections, we need a lot more housing units. more single-family homes, and maybe some apartments and townhomes, senior housing to kind of meet everybody's needs. And really, the housing chapter is very thick in this comprehensive plan document because we think that is one of your number one issues. If you can kind of solve that housing crunch you have right now, some other business development that's desired in the community will follow, as will the ability to then fund future quality of life improvements. That are important. So in this chapter, we talk again about residential growth, natural features such as the floodplain and open space, connectivity, which ties back to that quality of life, community character thing we talked about. How do we keep our small town feel as we continue to grow? How do we not lose our connected neighborhoods? Downtown Paola is one of the key considerations. In fact, even that economic development as well as the community character section include a lot of strategies on downtown and then our infill neighborhoods. Quite some time ago, we worked together on trying to figure out what is a planning boundary. And as you know, we plan way outside the city limits. This map is how far out we plan. Doesn't necessarily mean we're going to annex that far, but we want to understand, especially as the commission is tasked with reviewing those rural subdivisions within your 2-mile review territory. So with that, we start developing that future land use map. And I know some of you have heard this before, but we have all those same kind of land use categories. So I'm not going to read them all, but parks and recreation, program space, but then open space, ag land, undeveloped, could be floodplain, single family residential, medium density residential, typically townhomes, row houses, high density residential, typically apartments and condos. We also have large lot estate residential. That'd be typically what you're seeing maybe outside the city limits. It's on an acre or 2 or 3 or 4 acres of land. And then public, semi-public, again, what's owned by the school district, the city or the county. Office, a little more pure, either a doctor's office, an office user like you see maybe in the Kansas City Metro, things like that. Business estate, it's kind of a different category we created to deal with if we get into annexing, say, south along Casey Road, you have a lot of folks that have their house and they're running their business out of it. Well, instead of making them all non-conforming, if we annex them and zone them something else, maybe that is appropriate there, that somebody could have their startup business out of their home. And if you move there, you better know that that's what your neighbor's probably going to do. And then neighborhood commercial, it's a smaller scale commercial that's a little nicer to have close to residential uses. It's your smaller local go-to shops and stores versus highway commercial. It's the bigger box retail, the big grocery stores that we tend to push out towards the highway to attract the motoring public that's driving by. Of course, we have downtown mixed use, just like it sounds. And then business park, think of it industrial, but a little bit cleaner, a little bit nicer, not having the outdoor storage. And then we do have that airport. That is actually an asset. And so maybe around that area where sometimes it's hard for us to build housing because we have some airport restrictions or sometimes a little more noise. This is perfect for shipping, distribution, light manufacturing. And of course, we do have some heavier industry or industrial uses in and near the community. So we need a land use category to recognize that. So this is our proposed future land use plan. So again, those same color schemes we just talked about. We have in red kind of the heart of the community now, really planning edge to edge of the planning boundary. So as somebody brings in either a request to be annexed and a development proposal or a rural subdivision to either review, recommend the county approve, or recommend the county deny, you can use this plan to weigh accordingly. And that this is definitely the plan to use when deciding the case of a rezoning. If somebody comes in and they want to do something right here on the other side of the highway that's not single family residential and it makes a whole lot of sense to you, we recommend you go through the process just to amend this plan. Sometimes things change, but this plan is that starting point from which you can weigh decisions on should we approve or deny, or what should we zone this property, or what should be developed where. So it's very important that we keep this plan up to date. So again, if somebody brings in a really great idea and it makes sense, and we think we can handle it from an infrastructure standpoint as a part of that rezoning and approval process, update this plan, change and amend this plan. So with that, we are still pushing that we're a lot of single family residential, as would be typical and as we heard from the community. they do want to be a single family town, but also know the importance. We got to grow that commercial and industrial to help pay for things. And then we did add, not a tremendous amount, but a significant amount of multifamily, townhome land, apartment land. So you can kind of grow housing for folks who don't, are not ready to buy a house, or maybe seniors looking to move into something else. So that you have a little more option for your current residents, your future residents, frankly, the children of the community. Also in planning, we're reaching way out beyond where we have infrastructure. But this plan is to kind of put a stake in the ground and say, hey, you may own this little retail spot, this commercial development off of 68 Highway. Don't propose a rural subdivision. Hold out for the higher value land use of, say, commercial or business park or something like that. Because long term, each one of these interchanges are future activity spots. We all know that. And so it's a long-term plan to kind of get people excited for the future. Don't just sell what'll work today. And knowing also long-term that as we're sizing infrastructure, as we're adding new single-family subdivisions on the north side of town and annexing areas, we need to size the water system and the sanitary sewer system to accommodate that level of new growth. Whereas when we get to the west side of the railroad tracks and the Big Creek, we don't see that as a big growth area. Maybe that area is appropriate for those more rural subdivisions that are on their own little septic systems and maybe the rural water system that's out there. But this is not an area for heavy, intense, dense development. Same thing with looking to the south. We realize there is a limited amount of infrastructure now for sewer, roadway, water. But long-term, these areas are probably better servicing you and the property owners in the community as more of a business use and industrial use due to their location, proximity to the airport, as well as the highway and the interchange, and a little bit less desirable for, say, a single-family residential being so close to, say, the treatment plant, and let alone some other industrial activities that are already there. And so it's a little bit to try to get things in the right spot. So if that all makes sense, this was quite a process. We've made plenty of little tweaks to this plan. So I should have zoomed in this a little easier to see. So really the big push is we have new areas for continued residential growth in the short term, with the long term being kind of another activity center with commercial, business, multifamily residential right at the interchange. And then again to the south, areas for future business development long term, but in the near term, out by medical center, I always forget the welding shop. Doherty, thank you. Doherty Steel, and actually protecting and buffering them from having, say, new residential right across the street, because they make a lot of noise. And I think they're a valued employer in general, so perhaps we want to make sure we're making them feel welcome and always want to be in the community. But we kind of have that near-term development and then kind of that long-term business development with areas continuing for industrial. And that business has stayed off the old Casey Road, or maybe that's a perfect spot to kind of have your barndominium or shop house running your business out of your home. We have that kind of special land use category, should the city get in and annex into that area. Okay. We did make one tweak. Thank you to the open house. Somebody did go through and point out a couple of things. And so just across the creek here, across the other side of the railroad tracks, we did kind of expand off of Pearl that commercial area because it was a little larger than we'd actually colored in. And there wasn't quite as much single family. That was just a mapping error on our part. So in your packet, we did make that tweak and change. And it also included was an annexation kind of strategy or priority. So as somebody's coming into the city wanting to be annexed, because we do look to seek that these are always voluntary annexations. It's very unpopular and difficult to do any kind of an involuntary annexation. But to really prioritize those voluntary annexations where the city may actively connect with and work with property owners. And so it kind of makes sense. We're starting at the middle and we're working our way out. There's some infill sites. There's kind of on the other side of the highway at Baptiste. A little bit that industrial area south of the treatment plant, that residential growth area just to the north of the town today. And then just you see the 2As, 2Cs, 2Bs, that next tier, and then 3B and 3A much, much farther out as a priority. Okay. Same kind of setup on this chapter. We have all these different growth policies. And sometimes you'll be able to point to these and say, this is why we're approving or recommending approval or recommending denial of some development project. Because we want to make sure that we're being financially sustainable in our growth pattern. We want to allow for a wide mix of land uses. It can't all just be single family. Sometimes we do run into that. Single family doesn't quite pay all the bills, but we still knew single family is important. So there's a lot of single family being shown on this future land use plan. Encourage infill development that is appropriate, but the infrastructure is already there. So that's one of the where we get the most bang for our buck. And then strive that balance between land uses. It can't be all industrial, it can't be all retail. We do have to have that healthy mix. And then we want to promote best practices for zoning and subdivision regulations. Frankly, you do need a new zoning code. It's hard. It's complicated. It doesn't suit you well. You need something, I think, a little easier, more practical for you to utilize, your staff to utilize, as well as your development community, your property owners, your residents to just understand. And then we want to use this future land use map as a reason to say yes or no when approving a rural subdivision, so that you really protect your growth boundaries. And then we got to make sure as we're doing this, that those utility extensions are occurring. That's where that subdivision plan update will be really important. Okay, I went through a whole bunch on future land use. Anybody want me to go back and go through anything specific and in detail? And this entire document, as well as this future land use map, was on our website. And we didn't get anything that said, please change this, please change that. So it's just, oh, and the other thing I would tell you on kind of use of this plan, one thing we would encourage is just once a year, take one of your lighter agenda meetings and just flip through and think, is there anything in here that we think we should change as the commission? You know, what do you, is there anything that, is this out of date? Should we update this? We have a lot of really good housing information in there. Even from the land use plan, if you're running into a practical difficulty, we're always changing this, we're not liking this. Is there some little part of this should be tweaked or updated? I would definitely flip through that, as well as after we complete it with the city council, the implementation section. That is not all yours to own. That's spread across the city, but something to definitely consider. So after this, if you do make a recommendation of going to the council, we do the May 10th meeting. So
How close does this dovetail in with what the county has been doing in their comprehensive plan?
So we were kind of at two different parallel processes. One thing that the county has been involved in this. And so they've seen this. In fact, one of the Janet with economic development did make a couple of comments. We made adjustments based on her feedback. So they've been invited in a part of the process. If I can be a little bit selfish for you, I think you should be in the driver's seat on land uses around your community. That I do county planning as well. I look at it kind of as the city should really be how the city wants to grow, and the county should really support all their member cities.
You see that relationship happening here?
You know, here's a strange dynamic. You guys aren't alone. Sometimes there's conflict between the county seat city and the county. And I have to write a book on this. I don't really understand why sometimes. Sometimes there's a little bit of duplication of services, but it's a little bit crazy to me. And you're not the only one. In fact, I have not met one yet that there wasn't that conflict. I worked in one. We do a lot of county seat town planning. I don't know why that is. My goal, my hope is that going forward, it doesn't have to be, because I don't think you have mutually exclusive goals. You want to do what's right by, frankly, the taxpayers, the property owners, the residents. You do want to grow. You do want it to be managed and controlled. You don't want to lose quality of life. You'd like that to go up. You don't want your taxes too high. I mean, I think we can go through the laundry list. They're all the same.
I think I got an answer there somewhere.
Oh, yeah. I hope that answered that. Sorry. That was maybe more than I should have said, but yeah, I'm just being frank. I don't know why that is. It is.
I understand.
Yeah.
Anybody have any other questions for Chris?
All right, I think you guys kind of also know your next steps is before you have a resolution. Should you be interested in recommending this be approved, sending that recommendation to the council, of course, you guys can always defer. You could always say no, and you could always ask anything to be changed. And with that, maybe I should stop talking. Okay, thank you.
I couldn't resist doing that.
He gave you permission.
He did early on. He said I could do that, so I thought I'll use it. Well, what do you guys think?
I think it's a very good presentation. Covered a lot of areas.
A lot more in depth than our previous one.
Yes.
The last
Yes, it
area
was.
about the county and the city, I think we understand that, where we did have a territorial control
Mhm.
and
And
the county pulled it back in.
yeah, that's been addressed in this plan, and then we've also been involved in their comp plan as well too, so we're working on that.
Is
Yeah, I'm
there-
very,
is there
very
anything,
familiar with that part of it.
Yeah.
is there any opposing or opposition between the two plans as they currently are?
Not that I'm aware of.
That's a great plan, great detail. You can tell a lot of work went into it. I'd read it before tonight, but great job.
They did a great job.
Yeah, that's not easy to do that. That's great.
That's what I was gonna say. I remember being in on the very front end of this when we were going through all of the various proposals and
Mhm.
making that selection, and here we are at the end of it. I thank you guys for all you've done and for a great job, really. Appreciate it very, very much.
Is everybody comfortable taking a vote this evening?
Can I ask one
Yes, sir.
clarify, or a couple questions?
Yes.
On narrowing the roads, that doesn't seem proactive. And I understand the less asphalt, the less maintenance. But everywhere else you go, it's increasing road sides, it's increasing turn lanes. It's, like one thing I wrote, narrowing the roads eliminates bicycle lanes.
Yeah, so in terms of narrowing roads, really what we're getting at were those roads that were very wide. Silver Street's one of those. I think the lane widths are 18, 19 feet wide. Typical is 12 feet wide. There's no parking on the road. There's really that space not being used for anything. In terms of the bike lane, what we heard from the community over and over was that people were really interested in off-street bike lanes with trails, with the trail network. So it's really focused on that trail network. I think the recommendations are really to kind of explore that, and maybe it doesn't make sense to narrow the road. Maybe it makes sense to put some on-street bike facility on there. Maybe there's some industrial users, or maybe there's some kind of short-time parking loading zone needs on those that weren't immediately aware of. I think the recommendation is really see where you can optimize, see where it makes sense. We've got with the extra pavement, that's extra maintenance. That's also extra stormwater runoff, stormwater quality issues. With the stormwater quality permitting and everything that goes along with that. So there could be some benefit to narrowing the roads in terms of maintenance obligation, in terms of maybe that provides width for a trail along the side that people want. Maybe that makes sense to keep that road width for whatever reason. So the recommendation really isn't go and narrow all the roads. It's really, see if there's some opportunities, see if it makes sense in strategic locations.
Okay, great, good, thank you.
Any further comments, questions? Okay. Somebody want to make a motion to approve the resolution number PC 2022-001?
I would so move.
I've got a motion
I'd second that.
and I've got a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll put it to a vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign.
Yes.
Motion carried, resolution approved.
That feels good.
Yeah, great.
Awesome.
All right. Next item on the agenda this evening is Community/Economic Development Director Report.
So today, we received 9 new home permits from Roush Coleman. It's already has 8 out there, so. At last week's council meeting, Mitch Gabbard was introduced as codes enforcement officer, which is great. We were speaking at the beginning of the meeting. He is called from the police department. So he is fully dedicated to codes and nuisance violations, which is going to be great. He'll be able to follow through with much more since he's solely dedicated to that. We also had 5 police promotions. That was fun to see. That was my first fitting I had ever been to, so that was a neat experience. Council also approved Juneteenth will be observed by city employees. And we will be changing our office hours effective May 2nd. We'll now be open 7:30 in the morning till 4:30. So that'll allow for a little more traffic for people before work to come in. So,
Good.
trying.
Are the building permits for spec homes or are they sold?
They're spec.
They said they don't want to put them on the market until they at least have them framed. So that way they have a better timeline. But
I was by there today. They're cranking them out.
yes, they're pretty much ready to go, a lot of them, so.
Yeah, they've got the slab poured,
Yeah.
which they poured the driveways, which is kind of unusual because
Keith has been busy.
Yes.
Yeah.
usually you wait till towards the end to do that, so you're not driving over it with anything.
Right, they do things a little different than we've
Yeah.
had, especially with the meter pits. They want meter pits ahead, which
Yeah.
that's typically at the end. So we've tried to work with them on certain things, but we haven't had any complaints. They've been fantastic. The only complaints that we have as a city is that meters are becoming a problem.
Getting a
So,
hold of them.
Yeah, right now we have enough for what we have going on, but if they keep going at this pace, we're gonna have to come up with some other ideas, but
Yeah.
beg, steal, and borrow probably, but we'll be okay. It's a good problem. So Kirk has ordered them, and whether they get here in time is gonna be the issue, but
Yeah, that.
yeah.
Okay. Anybody have anything else for staff? Questions for staff? All right, hearing none, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Well, second.
No, go for it.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion carried.